decent season but not actually win anything, unfortunately. I worry that Radford's inability to deviate from his precise script will be the thing that may cause us bother. Still not convinced by the signing of Kelly. A lot will hinge on how he clicks with Sneyd. Joshua McKenzie, he's got in touch. He says, I expect the same as last season with us trying a bit more and winning the treble. I think Jake Connor and Mark Sneyd are going to be influential for us. I love his optimism, the optimism of youth.
I love his vocabulary.
A little bit better
nice
than last
use
year.
of influential, young man.
James Start says Grand Final winners and Challenge Cup semi-final.
I'll just say one of the highlights of my season was listening to Joshua's vicious assessment of Hull KR's season and how much he enjoyed them struggling. It was brilliant to hear that unbridled. You don't often hear it from kids, do you? But it was obvious that he doesn't like KR almost as much as he loves Hull. So thank you, Josh, for getting in touch, and thank you, Mark, for taking on the mantles there as fluid pours from my face. Right, so from Hull FC then up to Warrington, Mark. Let's take a look at these guys. Second in Super League last year, first after the Super 8, so they won the League Leaders' Shield. Faltered a bit, only runners-up in the Grand Final. It's still an achievement, isn't it? And they were also runners-up in the Cup. So ultimately a season of high achievement in some areas, but disappointment for Warrington fans in terms of the silverware that they could have picked up and what they actually lifted.
Yeah, and in typical Warrington style, I think it might just be like the last year for Warrington.
Right.
And Kevin Brown's a big reason for that, for me. He's a brilliant player at the best of his form, but I don't see him putting the fear in his opponents with the game on the line. Not like I think Sandown could have done. If Sandown had that turn-off injury in the middle of the season, he could have been... I don't think his spiral would have been
pronounced.
Would have been what
up to that point against you lot, he was the best player in the league.
Untouchable, yeah. Obviously, their pack is mostly brilliant, and one issue that's seemingly addressed from last year is front row depth. So you won't see the same drop off when Hill and Sims are off the pitch. Now that they've brought back Cooper and brought in Dom Crosby, and Andre Savelio deserves a mention in that breath, I suppose, as well. They've got a big squad. I talked about Hull having like 21 first teamers. I count maybe 25 or 26 for the Warrington Wolves, but I'm not entirely convinced by that depth. And I think a run of injuries like that suffered by Wigan or Leeds or Cass last year, and I think they will come back to the pack a little bit. And the reason why I talk about that really is they start the season with a significant miss, with Ben Curry out for at least half the season, and he's one of the most dynamic, entertaining, talented forward players, a game-changing forward.
Yeah.
And I think if they have any sort of other injury to one of their other game-changing forwards, and I'm looking at Darryl Clark or Chris Hill, then I don't know how much they overcome that over the length of the season. But I do think they have a big squad and a quality squad. Yeah,
no, I agree with you. And the other thing that I'd point out is that outside kind of the 6, 7 and 1 positions, this is a side that should be, and Stephen Ratchford's only young relatively, isn't he? But this is a side packed with like this youthful exuberance as well. You look at the age of some of these players, these are guys who are either coming into sort of like their mid-20s, or there's some really exciting young players. Like, how is Darryl Clark only 23? He must have been playing since he was about 12 from the amount I remember of him.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see Ben Curry back later in the year. Jack Hughes is another really talented player. Brad Dwyer's a lad who doesn't get enough credit for me in terms of what he offers. I'm excited to see George King's continued development. I have a question mark over Andre Savelio. I hope he kicks on now with a move and fulfills some of the potential that we were talking about sort of 2 seasons ago now. And Deck Patton at standoff, he brings them another option as well, and he's an exciting young player. I worry, as many people probably do, about a psychological barrier that exists as I pall around and over this rugby league organisation, because they have everything at their disposal in terms of facilities, in terms of coaching, in terms of playing personnel, and every time they get up to that point, they don't seem to be able to cross it, or they're the architects of their own downfall, or they come up against a side on fire. And again, I suspect that this will be the case this year. I think we're going to see much the same as we've seen from Warrington in the last 5 or 6 years, which is some very entertaining rugby league, some very strong performances, the odd slip up here and there, and then ultimately an inability to convert kind of that groundswell of form into the finished product, which is the silverware. So whilst they're another side that I could watch all day. They're in that Castleford bracket for me. I love watching them play. I think they've got some fabulous rugby league footballers in the side, but I don't see them turning that into a trophy again this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, in terms of key man, we all know what Chris Hill can do and will do, so I'm not going to pick him.
Nope.
Because I think this side needs something more than what he's already doing, which is outstanding, to elevate them to that winning the finals level. Yeah. So I'm going to go with Kurt Gidley as the key man.
Yeah.
He will want more than anyone else, I think, to win big this year. It's likely his last year. I certainly think if it isn't his last year, then it's his last effective year. How much extra he can add to his performances from last year will be the determining factor for me, whether Warrington win anything or come just short again. In terms of young player, I've gone with the young centre who I think can do anything, can play in any of the 7 positions in the backs. Actually, is young Toby King. I think he's a player with so much skill and talent. He made a couple of mistakes during the run-in in 2016 that people might remember. That there was the pass to Anthony Gelling, but that was him doing everything he could to get a win for his side at that stage, and it didn't cost them the League Leaders Shield in the end. He made a couple of mistakes in the grand final, but again, they were not mistakes of they were him trying too much and not quite being at that level yet, and it didn't affect his confidence. I was a little bit surprised he didn't get a starting squad number, but I understand why Rhys Evans retains his and Ryan Atkins retains his. But I would have been giving him the number 3 or 4 jersey personally. I rate him that highly. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays a lot of games, at least as many as both of those other two.
Yeah, excellent. No, he's an exciting player. I've gone with Gidley for my key man for many of the same reasons as you, so I won't retread that ground with you. But my rising star is the young second row Joe Philbin. Now, I had some first-hand experience of this kid when he was on loan at the Bulls this year, and he did very, very well. Last year for us. But then he went back to Warrington and actually started getting into the first team and became quite important to them towards the back end of the season. In a team that's full of stars, particularly in the second row. When you think about Curry and Hughes, he stood up and he stepped in when there were injuries and did a very good job for them. So I think, particularly with the injuries that they've got at the moment, with Curry being out, this is again an opportunity for this young man to kick him, perhaps not cement a first team place at the expense of Ben Curry, but to continue his development and become more and more important to Warrington Wolves as the season goes on.
Fair enough. I see them ending top of the tree after the regular rounds.
Right.
But then I think that's where it starts to just edge off. They're going to be the victims of Matty Smith grinding them out of the cup in the semi-final stage, and I think that's going to start to knock that mindset again.
Yeah.
They're going to finish second in the league and runners up in the grand final too, I think.
Right. Well, I do predict silverware for Warrington this year, but it isn't the silverware they want. I've got them finishing third after the regular season. I think there's 2 better teams overall, but I think that they might kick on in the Super 8s and end up finishing second overall to give themselves a handy berth in the semis, and then who knows from there. I suspect they won't win the grand final.
You're going to have to pick a grand final winner.
I don't think it's going to be Warrington.
Okay.
I picked a grand final winner.
Okay, that's all right.
I just wish I could pick a different team to win it. But I've got Warrington winning the cup as my final answer. I know I've flip-flopped a little bit over the last few weeks, but I fancy them to win the cup and to get through and do that. But because who have I picked so far this show? Saints, Cass, Warrington, one of them.
Yeah.
One of them 3.
Yeah.
It'll be neither of them now. So third up to second, not winning the grand final, but let's chuck them the Challenge Cup.
Okay. Well, here we go. We have our fan predictions. We're going to start with Wire Joe. He says, if we get a favourable draw early doors, I think we can go one better than last year in the Challenge Cup, because this squad should be able to beat anyone on their day. But we haven't recruited to fill the gaps in our 3-quarter line that we've needed to do for a couple of seasons to finally get us over the line in the grand final. Would take top 4, but can't see us getting much further than that this year. Ooh.
They are.
Broken. Alfie Dargana, as he's otherwise known, he says hubcap winners again and Brown to rule the world. Rob Warburton says grand final winners. Lee Whitnell says he expects that it's their year, obviously. David Clark, he says League Leadership plus the grand final.
Just read what I had.
Tom Eckley says
this might be my favourite tweet. I know it's early doors, but this is great.
It's a good sign of things to come, isn't it? Tom Eckley says, with the signing of Matty Blythe, we now have the ability to go one step further and win the grand final. However, we will lose to Wigan in the cup semis and finish second behind Wigan.
There you go. Good on Matty Blythe.
He did pick up the signing we didn't mention, so that was good of him.
I think there's a reason we didn't mention him.
Rounded out with Elliot Wrench, he says, we won't top the league, but we will be stronger over the season and not just get lucky in some games like in 16. We will come through the top 4 to win the grand final and enjoy another cup run, a more stable group of players this season. It's a final swipe at Chris Sandow there as we move on to last year's champions.
Yes, last year's
they finished
champions, the Wigan Warriors.
They triumphantly, after finishing third in the Super League regular season, rose to second in the Super 8, only to rise again to be grand final winners, putting behind the disappointment of a cup semi-final defeat to Hull FC, taking it home in the big one against the Warrington Wolves in fine style. How do you feel they're going to carry out 2017's plans?
I'm not going to waste a lot of time on this because you will have far more to say than I, but it's suffice to say that looking at this group of players, this is the strongest side in Super League in terms of the sum of its parts and what these guys can go on and achieve. Again, I won't talk at length about the signings that they brought in, but I think Luluai is going to be a great signing. I like Romain Navarrete as well, the young Catalan forward coming in for you. I think that could be something really, really exciting for you guys as well. My question was that towards the back end of last year, had they been found out a little bit in terms of the style of play that Sean Wayne was deploying, whether it was through necessity or whether it was just sort of a more turgid workaday style that he'd employed? Because when they started going expansive, particularly in the game against Warrington in the Super 8s when you won at the Halliwell Jones
sending off game,
all of a sudden you started playing this expansive, attractive brand of rugby league, which you clearly have a group of people who are capable of doing, and you look like a really entertaining, dynamic side. So my hope for the season is that this kind of up your jumper style that had kind of ruined you a little bit in terms of a spectacle for me falls by the wayside a little bit, and with the players that you've brought in, you experiment with expansive rugby a little bit more. But clearly you're the voice of Wigan Warriors on this podcast, so you have at it. How do you see things going? I
think it'll be probably very similar to last year for Wigan, with a scratchy, patchy league start, then to hit form from June onwards and to lift the big prizes in the autumn. Again, what Wigan have is proven depth. Again, harking back to what I said about the relatively small amount of first-team players I see in that Hull FC squad. In Wigan's squad, I see 26, maybe 27 first-team players. Players who've played a good amount of Super League games, have shown they can play at the Super League level. Yeah. I'd say 26 of them. And albeit a lot of the depth is provided by some relatively young players along the way, they've done it in the Super 8s, and they've won a grand final. And then there's a few other people that are coming in that'll feel like new signings, some more mature players: Joel Tompkins, Tony Clubb, Michael McAloran when we get all them back.
Yeah, FPN with the pre-season.
Well, exactly, yeah, and the mindset and the focus in the Wigan group is probably its biggest strength. The culture of that club has remained intact, even taking Matty Smith out, but you bring back in Thomas Luluai, you lose Josh Charnley, but you bring back in Joe Burgess. It's just the right. It just feels like you've got the right group of Wigan, determined, cultured. And a lot of people don't like our culture because they think we overstep certain lines or whatever, or don't always entertain. But and I get that.